What's the importance of groups for men?
Um, I think what I've noticed for myself is I used to play football before, and one of the things what I really liked about this atmosphere is that there was always a way of competitiveness, of wanting to improve, and I think that's something that men are more likely to give to each other. Yeah, this extra layer. Actually, talking about it, there's on the wall. There's already a scorecard because everyone who comes in are doing pull-ups at these bars.
No way.
So this is the competitiveness that we as men carry within, and if it's channeled rightly in the right way, I believe that this form of competitiveness can be actually used in the sense of seeking greatness. And I believe that's something that we as men can invite and encourage to each other and for each other actually to step into that. So a group of men is needed to be real, to come clean, to be direct, I always say where the women sometimes are more like the consoling part, they take care of us, then the men can do the same if they're in a good place within themselves, balance, and they will ask the question, and what's next? What you gonna do about it? And that's why I believe that men need men in order to really to seek their full potential, to be honest, and feel confident in themselves.
So what's the pull-up record so far?
The pull-up record, I think I think it's Thijs. And Thijs actually, he came in and he said like, okay, how is it actually with the score? And he did pull-ups that morning. He managed 17.
Okay,
So you guys are up with later, then let's go.
we'll try after. So to get back to the topic, I feel that over the past couple of years, it's become very accepted to talk about female development. The whole feminist movement, of course, has opened the space for women to talk about more about their own development. And do you feel that somehow the development, or at least the talking about development of men, has become kind of taboo?
Yeah, I think we're just not used to it that much. I think from what I noticed, I'm not sure if it's a taboo, but I think more it feels unfamiliar still in a way. And that's what I at least also partly experienced with my father in this sense that it was always a bit difficult, sometimes with the emotional part of it to really connect to each other. And therefore, what I started to notice, at least, which I definitely agree with, and where it comes from, I don't know. But what I did notice is that every time when I spoke to men, me being me, or I spoke to women, then 9 out of 10 times, both men and women would always say, Oscar, I wish there were more men like you. And then always two things came up. One was like, I know there's more men like me out there, so who are willing to open up and to take responsibility. And secondly, I also thought like, so men, what the fuck are we doing? And this actually brings me back to what you say is this sense of maybe, I think we lost navigation, we lost coordination on how to navigate through this field. And yeah, and therefore I believe we need the right role models, the real models to open up the space and to show these men also that it's possible, it's possible to meet.
So when they're saying stuff like, I wish there's more men like you, what do they mean? What kind of men are they talking about?
Yeah. That's a good question because it's not a question that I asked them afterwards, but what I do see is that the conversations that I had with them were always open, first of all, transparent. They were with integrity, so it was real. So therefore, it was also with authenticity. And in that process, it actually became this sense of extra layer of depth within that, being emotional, in tune with oneself, being able to, I think this is a very important aspect for both men and women, to being able to really listen, so you can genuinely see the other person. I think those are the two elements that are actually the most lacking in society because listening takes time, and it requires a lot of attention and energy also to be in tune. And it seems like somehow we want the quick fixes,
And do you get any people who are critical or might look strange at what you're doing? Like any critiques of people that don't understand it?
Yeah. The funny thing is sometimes when I see certain work from the outside, I tend to have a judgment on it. Like it seems sometimes, I don't know, sometimes a bit very soft. Um, but at the same time, I also use it actually to learn to bring it more authentically, because my judgment or my way perspective of looking at someone else's work, that is the same within the men's work, helps me actually to define how I do it. So therefore, is there criticism? I don't experience that much actually. I see it with some friends around me who are starting to do similar things, but somehow it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't reach me, or it doesn't get to me. There's not really criticism actually. The women are cheering very loudly for us. We have many women actually bringing their boyfriends, friends, husbands, really, and sometimes even buying tickets for their male coaching clients if it's a female coachees. So it's beautiful to see how the women are really supporting this movement, and in general, I can 100% see that the men are also supporting it. So I don't experience a lot of criticism, most likely because we're not just talking, we're not just only being soft, but we're also working. We're also making stuff tangible and making sure that in the material world it also gets manifested. So maybe it's, yeah, what can you say about that? We're bringing people peace, power, and purpose, right? So the peace within, the mental clarity, emotional clarity, to be able to control oneself, the power to manifest, to bring things into the material world, either that be through the how do you call it in Dutch? We say scheppingskracht.
Mm-hmm. Creation.
Yeah, power of creation, manifestation, and the physical abilities of your body. So yeah, what's there to say about that? And if you have those as a man, peace and power, then it becomes, you know who you are, you know who you're not, you know what you're capable of and what you're not. It becomes way clearer what the direction is as you as a person. So purpose comes next.
I mean, I want to get back to those core values in a bit, but first, Mishi, I wanted to ask you that, because you're part of the group that Oscar is trying to create. When you became part of going to, what do you call it, sessions, courses, what is it that you do?
It's fun enough. It's called the facilitator initiation.
Okay.
And I go ahead with your questions.
Well, so I wanted to ask, what was the reaction of people around you when you told them you're now part of this group and going to these sessions?
Yeah, great point, because I did have some critiques, and I realized the critique comes from a very superficial level. So when you hear your gathering of men, like, what is it? Like, people are just like, it's a bit uncomfortable. Like, what is it? And then I explain what it is. It is actually, and people start to cheer. People start to get interested, curious, So it's, I think, it's really funny with, like, also guys in my age. They might be like, oh, like, you really, like, open up, try to be vulnerable. Like, that's like, that's not really manly, like, but gathering of men, what is it? And then you really explain what is it about, and then they realize it's actually super similar to when we have, like, one-on-one with our friends, or when we come together with the boys and go out, or maybe sit around the campfire. That was like, once we did camping with my friends group, and then they really loved it. So they was just like, okay, this is the same thing. So in terms of the critical voices, I think it comes from the unknown. So people not really knowing what is it about, uncertain, and many times from people who are themselves afraid to be vulnerable, also with their girlfriends, also with any of the relationships that they are in.
Can I add something to that? Yeah, because I think you made me come up with a great point. I think the critique sometimes comes, if it comes from men, is because when you join a certain community of brothers, of men, people think that always there has to be something wrong with you. And this is an important point, because people always consider it as therapy. And therapy sometimes still has this negative weight, this connotation around it. Well, actually, I believe that it doesn't matter where you are in life. It 100% men are gonna keep you sharp and can really help you step your game up. So the critique, what I experience, not always comes from It actually comes from thinking that it's for the people who are mentally ill or are not capable of holding themselves. And, well, actually, I think like, no, any moment is the right moment to step in because there's more greatness within you that you can explore.
I mean, I've been talking to some female friends, and when I try to talk to them about groups for men, they don't seem to grasp the necessity of men to sometimes be surrounded by solely men. Because I feel personally that when you're in a group with men and one female joins the group, the dynamic can already switch a bit. The men start to become more on guard. They maybe try to one-up each other more. Is that part of the reason you're trying to make this like solely for men as well, and like a place for men to get together? Because of this female dynamic that comes with being a mixed group?
That's a beautiful question. What comes up now is that there's a reason when people wanted to connect more to God, to some God, whether you consider it outside of you or within you, actually you get back many times to a monk life. And a monk life is a way of celibacy and being secluded from the women, and the women being secluded from the men. So it's funny to see that I think there's a certain type of godliness within us, if you look at monks, that can only be found within ourselves, because if not, a lot of persona, ego structures can come in because we want to, in a way, possibly perform, as in there's this primal instinct perhaps that makes us different in our way of behavior towards the other gender than we would if we would just be men together, So that would be my take on it, yeah.
I mean, you talked about God for a bit and the connection to God. I feel that under, especially young men, there's definitely a rise in turning towards religion. Is that something you've noticed as well? And is that coming out of that lack of purpose that you're trying to help men with as well?
That's a good question, man. I think it's good what's happening as long as it's not blind faith. I think it's good that men gain a sense of direction in their lives, because this sense of direction actually gives them purpose and confidence. So I think as men we're served, or I think a part of us is serving society. And many times if you look at these terms, then actually it's also in a way serving God, serving life. So I genuinely believe that, yes, I think the movement is a good one. I do think that we should still place responsibility within ourselves. Because, yes, life can throw things at you and stuff can happen. And yes, you can believe in a greater cause, which I believe that there's also a reason for why stuff is happening. But the important thing is that we don't become passive in life because of that. And therefore, I believe that we should also, in a way, internalize God, bring it within us, whether that be bringing the Buddha within you, bringing Jesus within you, Krishna, Muhammad, anyone really, just simply to embrace that part of godliness, that you're part of God because He created you. So I think it's important to this sense of purpose to give what we have become, who we are as a person.
I mean, one can take the God pill to talk in social media terms, but there's also a lot of talk of the red pill, and that's where you get to the hyper masculinity that's going on TikTok, on Instagram, this type of stuff. Personally, I think this has grown out of a lack of men being able to explore their masculinity. So when the hyper internalized form of masculinity is shown to them, they're drawn towards that. So I was wondering how you think about being masculine, but also being able to incorporate the feminine part of you, as to avoid going completely into one direction. I guess kind of you can see it as a spectrum. You can go all the way to the hyper masculine, but I guess for most men, it's healthy to find a balance somewhere in between by incorporating some of their feminine parts as well. How do you look at this?
Yeah. Have you guys seen obviously Karate Kid, the first one, the original?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's the most beautiful example actually what comes up now, because you have Mr. Miyagi and you have the other guy who's from the opposite team, which for me represents the red pill, the one who goes into hypermasculinity, shouting, like, oh, showing off and that kind of stuff. And the funny thing is, and then you have Mr. Miyagi, and he teaches actually the boy, Daniel's son, he teaches him actually to come back to this balance, as in to come to the balance of understanding the art, the subtleties of life, and at the same time being able to still push the power fully when it's needed. Because the funny thing is, Mr. Miyagi, you don't really see him fight, right? You can't. But he's the strongest of all. He's like the Master Yoda, And it's the same stuff. Like, I think when you learn to balance the masculine and feminine, then it's actually most likely this feminine part is the subtleties, the connection to oneself, which means the connection to oneself, which means if you start to feel subtler, you're more connected to life as well, to everything that's happening around you, which is why they did the wax on, wax off, and listening and standing on the pole with the eyes closed, because then I'm like, oh, you're connected. You're connected. And if you learn to use those moments out of masculinity, out of power, at the right moments with control, then I believe we all have this ability to be the Mr. Miyagi within ourselves. So the balance for me is, if we start to look at masculinity, then many times we don't have the right role models who can also at the same time mirror a good sense of femininity within them. And if that doesn't happen, then you get the extreme side to one point. So I do believe that it's important that we as men indeed find this balance within, but I'm also curious to hear your
I mean, who are your role models?
For me,
yeah,
it's difficult, to be honest. At this moment, I've never, there's no role models in the sense of someone I look up to. I look actually in qualities within each of us that I can learn from. So it's not really one specific person, but what I do feel is that I'm more attracted towards I call it the sensei energy. So more like the Master Yodas, the Mr. Miyagis, because those the people who inspire me, who are not the biggest talker, not the biggest shouters, but when they talk fire. And when they walk in a room, super silently, you feel them, because it's an energy that they beam, that they radiate, while the sergeant, let's say, comes in and starts shouting. And that's unfortunately now, these days, also what sometimes gets a bit more attention. But I do believe that if there's a seed planted within everyone that feels that there's more to life, that there's more subtlety to life, something will draw you about that sensei that you see walking. Something will draw you. And that's, I believe, the path that will lead you to creating a better balance.
I don't know if you know this quote, but I think it's one of the most overlooked ones by Jordan Peterson, where he talks about you have to become a monster as a man, but then you have to learn to control it. And that leads me to a quote by Nietzsche, who was always a controversial figure to bring up, but I think it relates to the core values you were talking about earlier. And what he said is that, I'm going to paraphrase here, but it was something along the lines of, I've often laughed at those who thought themselves good because they had no claws. What I believe he's trying to say with that is that if you have no capacity in you to do evil, and then you are forced to do good, is it still good? And how I think that relates to your three values, the peace, power, purpose, is that if a man just has peace, then he's not going to feel fulfilled. But if a man has just power and purpose, that can become very dangerous very quickly. So trying to incorporate all those three values, you become powerful, you have a purpose that you're driven towards, but then you learn to control it by having inner peace. That's when you become like the best version of yourself, to speak in those terms. I don't know, does that resonate in any sense what I'm saying?
I had nothing more to say, man. No, you're right. How I always put it is, if you just have power, let's say, and you don't have peace, then you get these people who maybe have a lot of like physical power. Maybe they're strong or they have material power. But if you don't have peace, you will be forever restless, really. If you only have peace, but you don't have power, it's this typical, the dreamers, I call them, They're always moving away, avoiding situations, always feeling at peace, like, no, I'm good. But eventually they get nothing done in the real world. You can see it physically, but you can also see it in their material life. So if you have these two, I believe it becomes way easier also indeed to focus on knowing who you are, who you're not, what you can do and can do not. It means you become closer to yourself. And the more you become closer to yourself, the better the direction becomes clear to you. And that for me is purpose. So if you have the peace and the power, so you're able to self-control, to be emotionally in balance, and you have the power to create stuff, then we can create places like this, that come with purpose, from a good place, from a good direction. And but you said it well, man. It was nice.
Hey, Mishi, I'm interested to hear your side on being part of Oscar's initiative now. Those three core values, how have you experienced them? In what form or what activities or what topics have you seen those values?
Yeah, I think the whole initiative is all about authenticity, and that's where really it started, which somewhere incorporates all these values for me, because you have to be authentic in each of them. So what does power mean to you? For me, it can be really different than for someone else who started the whole program. What is peace for you? What is purpose for you? And I think that was, in a way, a really good part of the course, that we were from the get-go very much inspired to find what is peace for us, what is authentically what it means for us. And it can, for me, mean that I do a grounding, so a beginning of the session with the breath work, with something really chill to meditate. And for some others who want to facilitate, it can mean actually to shout, and that can also be in a way peaceful, or bring you peace through letting go something that you previously had in your system. So I think what's really nice is that to look at all these values as what does it mean for you. And I think that was the best teaching of Oscar, also in the initiator program, to look at it and try to bring it to other groups through your own lenses. And maybe other people actually need exactly what you have, what you can give, and maybe they don't, and that gives them an insight of what is power for them, and how can they show their own power.
Yeah, let me add up to that. I think it's, as Misi said, I think the beautiful part of it, to give an example, the peace. Okay, it's a long story. What you see normally with men, when they start to become more subtle to themselves, so they start to feel more in tune with their emotions, then that's phase one. The second phase is that we feel like we want to share it with someone. 9 out of 10 times, the first person that we share it with is either our mother or at least a woman. What happens then? We most likely, somewhere in our lives, we come to the realization that part of it, of this evolution of us, can no longer be found with women, that we need to make our way back to men. So what happens? We go back to men, and then we start sharing this emotion with men. What's the pitfall, which also happened during, for instance, this facilitates initiation, is that when we start sharing and becoming open and softer, that we can possibly stay in the softness with men. And this is something that I also experienced, that power is also needed. Peace is good, but power also comes in the sense of speaking your truth, coming out clear, creating clarity, getting rid of the tension. So also seeking confrontation in order to connect. And this was a way of me introducing back power into this facilitates course as we were halfway or further, 5 sessions in out of 6, that I started to notice there was a lot of, I call it love showering. So it was always like if someone didn't do his job, did not take responsibility because the kids came home late, or I'm selling my house and there were always reasons to not do it. And all the men would kind of like react like, hey, don't worry, man, we fully understand or whatsoever. And I'm like, okay, but this is not helping always. Yeah, so we should stop love showering. And what is it, if you feel now within a group, what is actually you always wanted to say to another person that you hold tension within yourself? And I believe that's the funny thing is everyone was afraid of that moment, but it's you can tell most likely. I believe what it was a moment that fully connected the group fully, because they now understood like, this is also part of power. But what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I think that was the let's confront each other exercise. And indeed, it was super valuable, especially in that process of, calling each other out. It was really holding each other accountable in a nice way. And I also came to learn from Oscar that if you have conflict with another person, it means that you really care about that other person. It means that you actually care about the relationship. If you are not willing to take conflict, it means you are ignorant and it doesn't really matter. Other person's growth and development doesn't really matter to you. And I think that was just a beautiful way to show for all the men in the group that, you need to do the work. And actually, we're going to be here holding you accountable if you don't do it. And that was actually a super powerful moment. And I also wanted to mention something about question we're circling around is like why we need to be solely with men. And that's a bit of the historical perspective on it. So for thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years, man initiation was really part of our culture. And what I realized is, in contemporary time, there is just no moment for that. There is no moment for, a given time when someone becomes a man to be initiated. And also in my personal example, this was a facilitator initiation, which was intended to create people who can facilitate these kind of sessions. But for me, actually, it was like a man initiation program. So I felt like really with this group of men, I myself became man. It was actually a group older than me. So I think that's also really part of all the initiation throughout the history for the indigenous cultures when you go off with the older men. And actually they teach you something that your mother cannot. Funny enough, in many of these real initiations, the mother is actually really cheering for this, but she has to act as if she's not happy for the boys to be taken out of their home. So there are some funny stories with that. Mothers asking other mothers after like, oh, did I look concerned enough? Did I act as if I was really mad? Because on the other hand, they are super happy for this to happen. And for me, it really felt that way, like from older men getting these teachings, actually getting the confrontation that I needed. Some men telling me, you are not real. You just talk a lot, but your heart is not in there. And these are really the nuggets that I took with me on this journey. And through that, I really felt all these values, power, purpose, peace that Oscar mentioned.
I mean, you said something very interesting about the mothers having to pretend like they're not happy. I'd like to talk about the opposite side of that. So there's this idea by Freud of the devouring mother, which basically goes along the lines of there's a mother has a child, and the child for 18 years is the complete focus of her life, everything. So when the boy becomes a man, the mother has to let him go. But because he's her whole life, she's not willing to. She wants to keep him as long as possible because that boy is her world. So what she'll do is basically make a deal, an unconscious deal with the child that I'll take care of everything for you, but you don't leave me. Again, this is something mentioned by Jordan Peterson as well. And well, what the boy has to do when he becomes a man is kind of turn his back on the mother and just go on his own journey, you know? And if you don't do that, you have a chance of going into this cycle, which becomes harder and harder to break out of. Now, that is the one-on-one example, but I feel you can kind of extrapolate this to society as a whole. Society today's survival is not our main issue anymore. We've got food. Most people have a decently paying job. There might be an overprotection in society that doesn't allow, especially men in this case, to go on their own hero's journey, to call it that. Is that, you guys agree with that, or what's your view on that?
Yes. I think I call it kind of like the mama's boy syndrome. And it's indeed the sense of always, I was part of it, like big time. My mother was actually my protection when I was still at home. Because every time when I would screw up, she would tell me like, hey, it's okay. And that's what I started to notice actually, that when I repeated third class at my middle school, I don't know what the name is, and then I repeated fifth class also as well, just based on 2 decimals only, that I remember sitting in the car, and then my mother said with because she bought the champagne because we could potentially celebrate me passing, finishing, and I didn't. And she still said like, hey, we can still celebrate this moment as you're gonna graduate next year. And for me at that moment, it was a beautiful thing, really beautiful. And it also marks the nurturing mother that I had, and actually the protective and overprotective mother, which for me was very easy to lean into, So every time when stuff had to be arranged, or I didn't have enough money on my saving account, but I really wanted a PlayStation or anything like that, then it was my mother who I went to, because I knew that my mother was always there to provide, and I could actually therefore not take responsibility fully for myself and therefore victimize myself. So I could always be this mama's boy with her, She was always taking care of me, and I believe that's actually a tricky place to be for a man. As in, I do believe that there comes a moment, as in, there's obviously a story of Iron John, where the boy needs to take away the key of the cage of the wild man below the mother's pillow in order to free himself again and to give expression to the wild man within. And that's a beautiful process of also energetically and maybe verbally saying to your mother like, hey, I'm not no longer the boy that I used to be. I'm a man now. And that shows itself in maybe words, but 100% in actions. So you get to choose whether you seek help, consolidation, any type of actions that you take in order to maybe seek this mother again, the nurturing face. And I believe that when we don't do that, that's when we know we're on our hero's journey, now we have to do it. And that's, I believe, where the confidence comes from. And we start this journey of becoming really a man by simply already not seeking the mother. That's already a step in becoming a man.
Maybe just adding on that, I just read Iron John, so glad that you brought it up. And there's a really interesting detail in there, which is that indeed the key to the wild man's cage is underneath the pillow of the mother, and then the boy has to steal it. So actually the boy cannot tell the mother that he wants it. So he cannot stand there like, I want to become a man. And I think that's beautiful in it as well, that your mother has the best intentions to really nurture you and then really protect you all the time. But you for yourself have to decide to go behind her back and steal the key, because she is not really capable of giving it to you. regardless how much she tries. And I think that's, there's a real beautiful metaphor in there. You having to go around it. Another thing I wanted to mention is, Yuri, you touched upon it with the society acting as a mother. And I think that's like a way more interesting philosophical question that we have. And how does it translate to? I think it translates to the victim mindset, that you are a victim. It's all right. You don't have to do the work. You don't have to, show up. And I think, another thing is comfort. So we all seek comfort, like starts raining, let's jump on the metro. I don't wanna walk on the streets. All these kind of little things that keeps man to be actually this wild form to feel like the power that you can survive anything. I think that's like a really troubling thing that society is, like current society is really imposing on man, and that man consciously, just like the boy who had to steal the key, have to go through and then have to get out of this and seek discomfort and seek all these challenging times, and seek times when you can stand up and say, I'm not a victim. I will get out of this, and I will get out of it stronger.
Oscar, do you feel there's an overprotection in society as well?
Yeah, I agree. So I agree with what Misi said, and what I also feel is there's a sense of instant gratification. Everything comes very quickly. So whether it be on dating sites or whether it be through alcohol or drugs, I remember when I really wanted to get rid of this sense of instant gratification. So I never joined dating websites. I had to grab my balls and all my courage together in order to just approach a woman, and there was one, and then also back in the days when I had to do this stuff, I realized that also many times it was alcohol that was helping me do this, helping me approach a woman, helping me do this. And then I thought, like, this is not sustainable, man. And that's why every time that I had to go now, because I knew there was alcohol in between, so that's why I felt like, no, I want to be able to do it in Dutch we say op eigen kracht, like on our own power supply, and that for me is the goal for men, really, to get back to this op eigen kracht, to this own supply,
I've looked a bit into what you're doing with the Gathering of Men, and I've seen what kind of retreats you organize and that type of stuff. We discussed the hero's journey already a bit, and there's so many myths, so many stories have been written that kind of describe the hero's journey, and one of them is slaying a dragon. So I kind of feel that the dragons might be extinct in today's society, that for men there's not that many obstacles to go through anymore. And is it in some part the kind of the feeling I had when looking at the stuff you organize? Is it that you're also kind of creating dragons for men to slay?
I like it. Good question. The first thing that came up is, I don't think there's no more dragons to slay. I think the dragons took a different shape. And the dragons took a different shape as in numbing, moving away from the body. Again, laziness, instant gratification. So in that sense, these have been the dragons, the weapons, social media, porn, you name it. All these things, those are the dragons right now. You don't have to do that much anymore. Well, I believe that indeed what we do now, we're calling in that maybe, we're calling in challenges. That's true. To be able to fight any type of dragon. That's it. We're creating the resources and the skills and the attributes that are needed to fight any type of dragon, which means sometimes that can be drugs or alcohol, or abstaining from it. Sometimes it can be porn. Sometimes it can be laziness. Sometimes it can be abstaining from solely relying on motivation, and then what do we do then as a antidote? Or what is the challenge that we give them is discipline, It's this peace of mind. It's being able to control the body by learning them ways of meditation and self-awareness, so you can fight any dragon. You just put on a different suit and armor because now you know what comes from within. Good question, man. I like.
Thanks. So I've discussed already a bit about your initiative, but could you explain a bit further about what the Gathering of Men actually is and why you started it?
Yeah. There's one thing that I want to mention. The Gathering of Men is not me, as in, yes, maybe I was the fire starter, but there's one thing for sure, it's not me, and I don't want it to be me. So let it be clear, as in, I genuinely believe and that I want it to be of everyone, and hopefully that's also the case. That's my goal. So yeah, how did it start? I think actually the story that I kind of shared already, is it's that I felt. I think the men who show up at these places have somewhere a feeling of knowing that they can be more, that they can do more, that they can achieve more. A feeling, a sensation somewhere, something is moving inside of them. A seed has been planted. And this is actually how this journey also started for me. What I noticed is that I knew that when I was playing football and I was with my friends there, and I was quite relaxed, man. So I was not the one who was smoking and stuff. Maybe sometimes I had a beer with the group, but I also realized, hey, this is not my game. I'm not digging this. So what brought us together was football, yeah. But the type of people that brought football together, they come from everywhere, And that's what I realized, that one night I was also just sitting outside and looking at the stars, and I was just drifting off in thoughts and imagination. And then I came back from the smell of weed, and I said, like, to the guy next to me, I said, like, hey, what are your dreams, man? And this guy looked at me with a stone face, and he said, like, what are you talking about, man? And that's when I knew I wasn't with the right people. That doesn't mean they were bad people, but that they were not my right people. And my right people are the ones who genuinely inspire me to become a better man, a better person on all levels. That was my first movement into seeking men, into understanding, like, hey, I need different people around me. It was a conversation between the Dalai Lama and Daniel Goleman. He's of the book Emotional Intelligence. I really recommend to read it. Where they kind of unanimously agreed the following, where they said it all starts with where you are and who you're with. And I agree, as in, if I want to become a better entrepreneur, I need to be with people who make millions, I need to understand their game. How do they work? If I want to become better physically, then I know where to go. If I want to dream bigger, then I need to look further than the people who are just dreaming over the next joint, And those are kind of like the elements that I started to move away from until the moment that I felt like, yes, I have friends that I can go in depth with, but I'm still missing an extra layer of greatness.
I mean, you are the product of the people you spend the most time with. So what is your advice to people that might be in the same situation that you found yourself in, that you just have this realization of, fuck, I'm just surrounded by the wrong people? How do you then go and find the people you should be surrounded by?
Get clear on what it is that you're looking for. That's the first thing. So if you get clear on what your next step is, so that you feel like, I think sometimes we don't even have to know where we're going. We just have to know where we're not going. So sometimes also the realization, like, maybe the first very simple answer is, I want to move away from the people who just spend their time drinking and smoking joints. Already creating distance from that, I believe that if everything is energy and it's simply just transcending, it means that also when you're moving away from something, it means you're creating space. Literally, if I would be here and I'm moving behind, it means there's more space here. If I come forward, it means that either the space move forward. So you're automatically creating, let's say, a gap, a place, an opportunity in the field to allow new people in. It's like opening a door, closing another one.
My favorite podcaster, Chris Williamson, he talks about the lonely chapter, where you feel like you don't connect anymore with your current friends, but you're still looking for new ones that fit you better with the goals that you're thriving towards. Is that something you experience as well?
Yeah, maybe a good question for Misi, as in maybe also interesting as you also came from a different country. So I'm happy to listen to you.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. It really resonated what you said with distancing myself from that type of group, that type of man at a young age, go out partying, the womanizer in that sense, really like that being the whole topic of discussion was really like for me when it started to stink. I'm like very similar to Oscar. I was like, I want to talk about other topics, like what are your dreams? What are the things you are most curious about at the moment? What you research, what you like what you lose sleep over, what breaks your heart, these kind of topics. And they just don't come up when being with this certain type of friend group that is a very superficial, very I don't want to also look down at these people, and I think they have their place. So for instance, when I'm like just want to have really like fun and entertainment, I'm really happy to spend time with certain people. Whereas maybe the first time I was in this course, now meeting week after week, I felt like, oh wow, now I have a friend group who is different, which is really like willing to go deep. So to me, that was really, really resonating. I do believe there is some loneliness attracted to it. So just as in a hero's journey, I have also quoted my favorite artist like Kid Cudi. In one of his songs, he says like, "Come on, young homie, don't feel down. You will find real love." All of the heroes, need to get lonely. So what he's saying is really that there is this phase where you a little bit feel lonely when you are feeling like you need something new, but you don't really yet have that group. So to me, it was really moving away and distancing myself, like saying, okay, on a very practical term, I'm like, okay, like not every Friday I'm gonna go out and drink with the boys. Not every Friday I'm gonna roll up a joint and then, like just sit in the living room and chill. But like, some of the Fridays, some of the Thursdays, I'm gonna go to the gathering of men, and I'm gonna take off a Saturday and go on a sweat lodge instead of spending that Saturday in the park, which is also really nice, doing other activities. So I think it's literally just like, instead of choosing your people, choosing your moments, and like be really smart with your time on how many days a week you need this kind of activity and how many days a week you need the other kind of activity.
How did you get connected with Oscar?
Actually, it was really a random coincidence, if you believe in such, but I was attracted to the Gathering of Men by Robert, actually. So I think a really day oneer from Gathering of Men. Just through his Instagram, I saw they are doing groups for men, and what Oscar said really resonated is that it happened to me at a time where I already felt this little nagging in me that I need something else, I need something different. And that's where, if like that trigger came, like the Gathering of Men with a group, and it immediately like attracted me, like just my curiosity. I'm a really curious person, like see, okay, what is going on there, what kind of activity they have. And I have to say, the first thing that really got my attention was the community. So immediately you become part of the WhatsApp group and you see messages every day, and it's men sharing, and it's like, I was at the time trying to build a community of young professionals, and I was like, how do they get this kind of engagement? And I think it's just being real and bringing up real topics that everyone struggles with and have the courage to talk about. For us men, one of these topics is sex, right? And then I see it in the group, people sharing about experiences around that, around porn addiction, around any of these taboos that men are really not willing to discuss in even with their friends, I think, especially with their friends in many cases.
You discuss a lot of heavy topics in this group as well, right? I'm sure there's a lot of laughter and fun stuff as well. But when discussing all these heavy subjects and hearing all these people's stories, how do you make sure it doesn't affect you yourself too much? Because you can, if you all the time you hear like the stories of people and their deepest feelings and stuff, that can start to hit way heavy on yourself as well. Is that something you've had to deal with, or that was no problem?
Yeah, to me, I'm a really emotional person, and it really, I tend to take over the pain of others, the issues of others, the problems of others, and I think, Oscar, probably you mentioned this also in the course, but what is really like a piece of knowledge I try to live with is that it also comes from this victim society that if you take over the pain of others, it also means you think they cannot deal with it themselves. And that's really the switch, the flip on my mind, saying that, I actually really trust you, and you can sort it out. You are strong, and you are capable, perfectly capable of carrying your own pain and then sorting it out yourself. Yeah, just this mindset shift, I think, goes a really long way.
What are some of the moments that stood out for you in your time with the group so far?
Watch out now, eh?
Yeah, one
come up with stuff.
No, one thing I really remember is one of the participants really having a rough patch. So like how you mentioned in terms of it was a challenge not to take his pain over. It's really like suicide involved from a close family member, and then really seeing how he turns that darkness, that pain, into something productive by connecting with other people who have similar traumas. Like, even now I have goosebumps talking about it, because it was just such a strong moment of bringing your pain, your darkness, and then turning it into light, into gold, something beautiful, and seeing how he really went through this process from the first day when we just had a normal check-in, just really brief, really like crying heavy, until the last day when he was ready to get it, when he was on a mission, saying that I'm gonna go out and help people and support people through my own pain. So just in a few weeks, I think that was a beautiful moment to see, from day 1 to day 100 or something.
And Oscar, what has stood out to you so far? What's the moment you still made an impact on you?
Wow. I think it's I think this is it. I'm not sure if I'm picking out one specific event or anything, but what I really what I tend to live by, I'm a big fan of the Tao Te Ching. And there's one part of the citation, I don't know it by heart, everything, but there's one part where they say, but the sage kind of does the work, and helps it create it. And at one point he says, when the work is done, people will say we did it ourselves. And this is where I want to, so every moment of euphoria for me, or thinking like, okay, this is it, are those moments of purpose, perhaps, to see that it's no longer that men are standing solely by themselves and they're capable of holding themselves. Let's say they can fully stand for themselves now. And whether that be first alone, if you're able to facilitate, to hold yourself, and then to see that other men are also taking responsibility for each other. That's where I win. Because I also don't want to be always the nurturing man who maybe started it and everyone's just waiting for me to give a sign. No, my goal is not to be if I am a leader, and not to be the type of leader, everyone's like, okay, what's he gonna say now? Okay, we're gonna go left. Okay, Oscar says we go left. Let's go left. I was like, what the fuck? Think for yourself, man. What's this? And that's what I kind of also really want to give to the people. Like, okay, what do you think? How would you do it? You know, it's really creating this inter sovereignty within themselves, and then connected to other men, so I can actually very gracefully and full of gratitude step out. That's what makes me feel.
To get back real quick to the creation of Gathering of Men, you mentioned it came out of your own journey, but of course you could have just said, I noticed that I can be more, I will work on myself, and I will become the best version of myself, and I will go conquer the world. But there was some part in you that was like, I wanted to be able to facilitate this for other men as well. Where do you think that thing came from?
Yeah, I think that's I think the more you become connected to yourself, the more you start to pick up on the field. And there's this beautiful book from Gary Zukav. It's called Authentic Power, where they talk about your soul's purpose matches your personality, and that's how you bring authentic power. And this is what I generally also feel and experience myself, that I felt like, okay, I think I know what I want to bring, and that's bringing human connection more into life and more responsibility. Somewhere it's in my nature also to if it's not there, let me create it. So what I did was not, my goal was not to facilitate. My goal was literally phase one, and that's what I told also at the Facilitates initiation. We're not necessarily here to already make you the next Tony Robbins and to come out like, I'm the best facilitator, and now I can do everything. And if you have trauma, I'm going to fix you now. No, it's not the goal. So everyone who comes in with this big expectation, I also tell them to let it go. Because what is the most important is that how I started is not by facilitating. How I started is literally by gathering the men. Literally. I just started gathering the men. That's it. I just thought like, you know what? I want to talk real. I want to have real people around me who can help me step my game up, who I think are emotional capable of mirroring me and holding themselves. Where can I find them? I said, you seem interesting to me. Okay, are you in? I don't know what we're going to do. We're just going to sit and talk sometimes. I don't know what's happening. And then gradually it became more like, okay, maybe it's cool if I bring in this topic or this exercise. And only when I went through those phases of then learning, so first gathering the man, then learning to facilitate. Now I'm in service and giving back of who I've become, and that's teaching initial facilitation.
From a more entrepreneurial side, creating a community is incredibly difficult. What are some struggles you came across that in building a community, and how did you succeed and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. But the funny thing is, you say, how is this guy engaging everyone in community? I don't know. First of all, I think I'm not the best community builder, in my opinion. But I think there's an interesting point here by your question and what you said before. I think I didn't do it. I really didn't do it. It was the purpose who did it. It was the bigger mission, the bigger vision that created it. So the only thing that I did, like the place that we're sitting now, I just created a space for purpose to come in. For the men to come in, for community to come in, because the seed was already planted within the men. So my only job, maybe then as a leader, is to say like, okay, here's a place. You go fill it in, go fill in the blanks. Okay, I have an evening where you can come together. Come if you want. And I think there it just happened. I don't know. Because people, when they feel the purpose of it and they felt it, people are willing to contribute, man. Then there comes this extra factor that it's not about money anymore. And that's a funny thing. It's about purpose. And that's eventually an element that I believe is important in all of us.
So you basically just facilitated a purpose, and the purpose was able to attract people on it by itself.
Yeah, I think I simply just created clarity in purpose that already lived inside everyone. But now suddenly it became tangible. Oh, there's a group. Oh, there's space. Come.
And I'm interested, Mishi, like, I believe you're doing a couple sessions. And what happens after? Is there, you stay part of the group and then there's events that you can go to, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, so from my point of view, just maybe going back one step, like about the community, because that will tie into my next answer. But it's really fun. I have some experience with creating communities, and what Oscar says is literally my experience, that you cannot decide to start a community. It's just not how it works, because a community be created by the people who feel attracted to a certain topic or a certain purpose. And indeed, nowadays, like, that's such a buzzword. Also, in my consulting job, people are, oh, let's create a community for shavers that we can attract and create the best shaving machines with. Like, these are not the kind of topics that people will be attracted to. But indeed, like, being real, surrounded with men, really discovering your masculinity, that's a big topic that people would be super interested to join. And that's the entrepreneurial side, I guess, of the Gathering of Men, and what Oscar did brilliantly, and the other man who started with, to just bring in the topics, and then people will come in and they will really look for this. They will kind of have a hunger to join in. And that's also the case for me in terms of being a little bit more involved with the initiative. So what you asked, what happened so far is that I went first to a few of these gatherings, regular gatherings, which would be Monday evenings, and they were really, really super interesting. But I had this hunger of, I want a really little bit more, you know. I want to, maybe also myself do it, myself try to facilitate. And this is really where was then when the facilitator initiation program came along. And that was, I think, around 12-week program, when we, on a weekly basis, had longer sessions with more engaged groups. And after that, actually, it was also like, okay, what's next? And then I think some people from this group were really ready for the next step. Some said that actually this was really good and I have to integrate it. And I was also one of these who said, I'm ready for the next steps. I'm really looking for what's out there. And then, now I will also co-facilitate the East chapter, so like the East part of the country. On a monthly basis, we will do with a really dedicated group, deep dive on a monthly basis, meet up in person. And every 2 weeks, I will facilitate the online session. And then in terms of the physical one, so once a month on Sundays, I will be co-facilitating with the main facilitator, Lars, is doing on the East. So maybe also for the listeners, there's just like a way how this community develops. I believe that people who are ready, who really want to do more, they have a place for that. And that's also true for this whole space Oscar is and the gatherings is creating. That if you want to contribute more, you want to do more, that it's possible. And I think that's a beautiful thing about community, and also finding out each of our individual strengths and see how we can help with that. That's the invitation, and I see this invitation happening in the smallest of conversations on WhatsApp in the group, where some people are really good at welcoming others, and they just say always welcome to the group, to the new members, and they are really good at that, and they really contribute in their own way through that, which is equally as important as for someone who puts this green stuff on the wall for the space itself.
Nice. I believe correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the next big event that you have is a retreat in Portugal. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm leaving tomorrow.
You're leaving tomorrow, no?
Yeah.
So can you tell me about that? What is that like, and what are you going to do there?
Yeah, so it's kind of based on the principles of peace, power, purpose. I think one of the important elements that Misi didn't experience yet, for instance, is Missy joined, for instance, the regular evenings once a month. So you come once a month. It's very low key. You come whenever you want to come. Then there's also the facilitates program for those who feel like they wanna learn how to authentically lead from the core. The funny thing is they're only getting 2.5 hours. Well, I do never 2.5, maybe 3 because I always pass time, but 3 hours every twice a month, let's say. So, but there's something so beautiful about spending. Imagine what we did in 3 hours, just one night. Imagine spending 4 days together. It's a total different ball game because there's something about waking up together, sharing the feast, making sure that everyone putting food on the plate for your brothers, sitting together, tea, coffee, what do you want? But also going through the shit together, like really physically feeling like, this is tough, but the only way to get through it is to stick as a group. And then also experiencing the moments of peace, like how are you at peace with yourself, which is one part of it. How are you at peace with others, and how are you at peace with the world? And these elements, the 4 days of fully just spending time together, waking up, sleeping together in Paris in a tent, it's a total different ball game, and actually bring you through those 4 days. So the intention of those 4 days is actually what we said before. It's how you connect to yourself, how you make sure. I think we live too much as men in the field of I think I can, I think I cannot, I guess yes, I guess no. The guessing is not serving the confidences of men. The thinking is not serving the confidence of men. The only way we get to learn and we gain confidence is by doing. So that's why we're putting them fully immersing in the experience to feel like, okay, now I know what I can do and can do not. And that means you don't even have to be the best to have confidence. You gain confidence by knowing. That's when you gain confidence, by knowing what you can do and can do not. A king, if we talk about the king energy, and a king is not perfect, but he knows that, and he carries himself with grace and confidence. Because he learned to embrace and accept his flaws.
And first of all, that's really cool. But we've talked a lot about sharing and talking within each other as men. But I believe during this retreat, you're going to be doing some crazy physical stuff as well, huh?
Of course.
What kind of stuff are you going to be doing?
It's needed, man. The funny thing is, you're surprised how many men, even doing, this is a funny one, eh? We're talking about...
bar?
Yeah. We're talking about the most basic thing that we're putting out there. And it reveals so much about men. First of all, the competitiveness and their physical shape. And then the invitation, if they're scoring only a few pull-ups, there's work to be done, brother. There's work to be done. You need to step up your physical game.
I mean, I agree, but why? Like, I guess the question is, what do you believe the relation is between mind and body?
Yeah. Once again, peace, power, purpose. So I believe that it's important to be proper. If you want to live a life of purpose, you need to be able to live a life of purpose, which means your body must be capable of following that purpose. And if you're always tired or you're not in shape, if you're not eating well, where are you going, man? There's nowhere you're going. So therefore, I believe it's important, and also, in a way, gain more confidence, but also, in a way, gain more authority indirectly, is who do you take more serious, If you see a guy coming in who looks solid, and comes in confidently, and you feel the peace within, or let's say you have two persons who both feel peace, and you need to do a physical job, or you need to get shit done. Who are you choosing for? Is it the skinny guy who can do two pull-ups, or is it the one who can for sure do a 20? It's funny because the physical aspect maybe comes with a sense of trust sometimes also, if I think about it. But I'm happy. Yeah, I'm curious.
Can you explain that further?
I can't tell. Maybe if we go back in the days, it's the physicality of man who protected us as a society. And therefore, I also see that if I would be on a football team, in general, I would not go for the short, skinny guy. I would look for the one who has big calves. Or you think like, big calves, he can probably run fast. So there are elements that I believe add up to what we can actually physically put into creation in this world.
Have you seen Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Because to give a counter argument to that, and I'm not sure because we're talking about it in a moment. I'm not sure if it's a good counter argument, but do you know Tyrion Lannister?
Yes.
If you're purely looking at physical ability in that sense, then you would never choose him. But I think he can be, when you're going to war, which happens a lot in Game of Thrones, if you're going to war, he's a very valuable asset. So how do you distinguish that? Because the physical prowess can be very important, but
I love this, and it's a good one. It's actually from, I think I heard it, someone told me that he said it, and his name is Tibor. And he said, in Dutch, he said like, I'm not resourceful enough to buy this piece of land, but I know the people who are resourceful enough to buy the piece of land. And this is for me also power. And this is for me what Tyrion Lannister had. He didn't have the physical ability to fully to go to war and to be the front man, but he had the people surround. He had also the from power, the physical influence to influence others to get shit done.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So he had let's say, I think the word is he had the resourcefulness within him to still manifest stuff.
So of course, like power can't just be physical power. It has to be power in so many different aspects.
Yeah.
Cool. And Misi, I already heard you talking about being surrounded by men who are older than you in the group. What kind of age are we talking about around that sense?
And maybe Oscar knows better from the registration forms, but I believe 30, 35.
Okay, because what I'm very... Is that correct?
We're between 25 and 45.
Okay.
But for instance, yesterday there was a one man from the East. He's a good friend of us, and he was there from the beginning, and he still is. I'm massively grateful for him. His name is Victor. And I believe he's 65-ish. He was yesterday. He was helping building those things, So he was fully here from purpose, helping.
Because that was actually my question. Because I talked to my dad before this podcast and talked about what we wanted to discuss, and he proposed to me, but what about men my age? Because we can struggle with that stuff as well. So that's why I was wondering, is certain masculine issues, is that a young man's game? Or is it something you can have at a later age as well? I guess you're better to answer that.
Yeah, that's a very good one. I think what we're trying to create here is we're not trying to base it on themes, but the beautiful thing is, if you look obviously back in the days, like I still need uncles, I still need people as your father to be there. On purpose now, when we leaving tomorrow for Inner Alchemy in this afternoon, I have Anthony coming in. Anthony is a very solid guy. He's 62. Has peace, has power, and has purpose. Because for me, the uncle energy is important. But the funny thing is, I don't have something directly that I want to ask him. But being in the presence of, I know that I can always ask and pose questions that I know they'll probably have at least more experience on. So therefore, I believe also the younger generation, either if they're dealing with something, please come. If you're not dealing with something at this moment, also come. Because being surrounded with other men, being able to already step up your physical game, your peace game, to being in self-control, and to having the resources of men around you for when it's needed, and also to make sure you stay on top of your game. Yeah, I would recommend, it doesn't matter where you are.
I guess it's kind of clear in some sense how a younger man can learn something from an older man who has more life experience. But have you seen also the 45-year-old learning something from the 25-year-old?
Let me chime in here with also saying one really memorable experience that we talked about it was last year Father's Day special, regular gathering, where one of the men brought his father. And that was so massively emotional, I think, for the whole group, seeing that. That was one exercise where actually you had to say something to your father that you always wanted to say. And him standing there as actually a real father was super interesting. And in a way, what I saw in him, and he also mentioned at the end of the session, answering your question, that he learned so much as in what his actions might have caused as being a father from hearing it from other people who are not even their son, so not even his son actually. So I think that's massively powerful in terms of the way of reverse mentoring. I think that's also now a big topic of what you can learn from the younger, and then vice versa.
I'm interested in both of you have noticed this, but I can imagine that when you grow a bit older, that you might lose that spark a bit, that spark for life a bit, you know? Have you seen these older men regain that spark by hanging around with younger men?
Victor is the prime example, you know. I think it's important because I agree. It can be that the older generations, and especially if you're not used to this work, maybe in many ways, physically, obviously for sure, and also in habitual patterns, that gets a sense of stagnation, that everything crusts in, kind of, let's say, and rusts. So therefore, I 100%, if I know I'm older, I want to be surrounded by other men, 100%, to actually to learn, you know, from the younger generation.
So what are some of the things they learn from the younger generation? Of course, you already named an example, but can you give some other examples?
Yeah. I think actually the funny thing is, I think there's a lot of healing taking place for older men, because in many ways, because they still get an opportunity to be surrounded and to look at their own stuff so they can heal. And actually there's a lot of hope that also comes, because these men also see that there's a younger generation growing up who are already willing to look at this shit. And this is so inspiring for them that they actually, the funny thing is, it increases in purpose. So many times, instead of when they get to the end of their life, they think like, okay, I'm done, there's nothing more to explore. Suddenly there comes a new fire, gets ignited by purpose, because, hey, I can be there with other men. I can look at my stuff, and I can also serve as an elder, as an uncle, to guide wherever they can.
Just also to be a bit concrete on that, I had a really cool conversation with my own father about this, and my limiting beliefs of, say, be a coach with like 25 years of age, and then asking him, yeah, but what could you learn from me? And then he really was like, yeah, you know, like I'm right now at the end of my career. I did one thing my whole life, and I'm a bit stuck of where could I go next? And I kind of have to like reinvent myself, and that's like such an experience that you need that spark, that fire, that young energy with, and then to see the courage. I think with many of these old men, they used to have it when they started, but they kind of forgot it. They kind of was like going on with their careers, and now it's like, yeah, I should retire. I don't know what else to do. And I think that's where if you have that energy, that spark, see how you can move forward, that immediately that limiting belief can be dissolved.
Yeah, can I add something to that? I think I love listening to people to reflect on what's actually happening. If you look at the previous generation, so let's say the older generation, they didn't have a chance to build community in the way that we did. They built a place, they built a space, they built stuff. They simply had to show up and do the work, so there could be a family to sustain. Which means, but that has been their life. That has been their life. If you look at the period of industrialization, it was really just fire, you know, constantly. That doesn't mean that their desire was never to build community and to grow family in a way. but simply there wasn't an occasion to. And that's a beautiful thing. Like now they've done this not knowing what will come next. They sacrificed themselves. They became of service. And now suddenly there's a younger generation coming up that is actually creating this need that they also felt. And now suddenly they managed, they did their work, and they get to still experience the sense of community. Like, this is actually what I then also longed for, and I can still now experience still.
But if we look at history, I mean, Misi, you already gave an example with the initiation of men when coming of age in a tribe. Men being in groups, if we go way back in history, going out hunting together, for example, but later as well, it was very normal for men to be with just men for prolonged periods of time and have these groups. But I guess the last 100 years, there's really been this individualization of all of us. We're all in our own little bubble. And that's where that lack of connection, and I think that's why the purpose, people are so much striving towards that or going for that, because we've been so individualized. What do you think has happened? Like, why are we becoming so individualized and so separated from each other?
I think, obviously, this is a theory, but it's a big gut feeling. But I think it's a sense of control. As in, if you look at 300, the movie, the 300 Spartans, they were able to fight the big group because they were a collective and they stuck together. Put 300 of these Spartans separately, and they would never win against the same amount of men, army against them. So I think it's important that men actually stick together, and when they don't, just in general in society, when there's isolation, I think we're getting numbed in a way that is actually really affecting our sense of purpose also, and our sense of belonging, and therefore it becomes easier to control. So therefore, I believe it's logical that when you create separation, that it's easier to control, because then there's only one truth. It's only yours. Like, hey, am I crazy when the health system is saying this or this? But if there's like 300 men, 300 Spartans, 300 community members that say like 1 million against 300, then at least but there's 300 people who think like me, and that's who experience like me, who are the same as me. And that's actually what community does. It gives you this sense of belonging that actually fortifies and multiplies this sense of purpose also within. And I believe it becomes way more difficult to control. And if you look at things, then the whole news is about separation, division, negativity, you name it. And I believe that's a tricky place to be, because emotional islands, and for instance with COVID time also physical islands. So what's there to stand on? It's crazy. You're just there by yourself.
I guess one issue I always have when discussing these subjects is that it seems like it's a problem, the problem that men are having nowadays, that it's a problem that has grown out of luxury. So we've got it so good that we can start thinking about, well, what is my actual purpose, and start really like exploring yourself and this type of stuff. Back when you were talking about the industrialization, when you were working all day, every day, you had no time to do self-exploration, and you never could look for your purpose because there was no purpose for you. There you were just your job, and that's who you were. So I kind of feel bad in a sense that we're having this issue, and that it kind of feels like we're also victimizing ourselves, because it's very much, even nowadays, a upper class problem. I feel like maybe you have different experiences in practice, but I don't see as many blue collar working class men struggling with the same type of stuff. Is that something you see as well, or
what do you mean with the same type of stuff?
I mean, the working class people that I see around me, I feel like they're not struggling as much with finding their purpose. And when I look around me at all the people I know from university, they're very much looking for their purpose and struggling with this type of stuff. So that's why I kind of feel bad that it might be just because we have it so good that's why we're having these problems. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it. I think that's I think that my opinion. I think that's a perception. What I've seen is that I've sat with famous people. I've talked to people who are highly successful, and they somehow they come home when they talk to me. So what's the reason? Because they suddenly can talk about topics that actually already live inside of them, which they're normally in their habitual atmosphere they can't really express. So I don't judge anyone anymore based on, let's say, their physical appearance or what they do at work, because I know this journey of life we all go through. So I know there's discomfort at certain moments, there's depth in others. So I'm not sure if I fully agree, but I do agree with the fact that there is indeed a generation. Again, the previous generation or the people, they created space, and we stepped into that space, and suddenly there's less work to do. So yes, big other questions can come. Yes, I think so. That's true. I also think that this is part of life. This is how it's supposed to be, that we bring more a sense of consciousness, like we created the space and now people need to fill it in. They did the work, so now we can come up with the big questions.
Michi, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just also in the fact, more on the empirical part, like one of the main contributors now, so the initiation program was actually a blue collar worker, right? And he really came into the space, I think, with lacking purpose, partially with his work, but also in other spaces of his life. And I think that's true in general for a lot of people. Even if you have a blue-collar job, you can still lack purpose in your relationship. You can still lack purpose in your friendships. You can still lack purpose in with your health and physical appearance. And in that sense, like, I see what you mean, and I think that's maybe a bigger population that lacking purpose, let's say on the professional front, for just pulling papers and be part of a multinational and just really feeling like you don't make any impact with your work, versus maybe someone creating something with their hands. And I see that's a big thing that men actually lack nowadays, that be active with your hands, actually create stuff that is tangible, that you can see the impact of, that is in the material world there, and then see what is your impact with that. I think there is like a bigger group with the white collar man that is lacking that, but I also see examples on the other side.
Is working with your hands. I think that's a very great point, because I personally feel that as well, that it's so rewarding to see something tangible in the world that you created. Is that something you're trying to facilitate as well?
Let me look at your hands.
All soft, all soft, all soft.
Yeah, I mean, there's cuts, there's more the calluses and stuff.
Yeah.
I think once again, I think it's needed for men. We need a physical game. That's where we gain the confidence from. It's in there. It's not from building an Excel sheet. It's from knowing how you can physically get shit done. Manifest, build a table, do the garden. Exercise, that kind of stuff, that I believe is important. And now we're just creating in many ways. We're creating softies in the sense of literally hands. Like the other day I was helping a friend, and we had to put something together, and even then when I had to explain him how to turn a screw, what way is out and what way is in, not to judge, but to say like, okay, this is also what's still out there. And yes, I think we need the basic knowledge of that kind of stuff, but simply for the fact of that it's good to work with our hands. We're made to do that. We're not made to sit behind a desk all the time. We need to move. We need to physically activate the body and to see what we're capable of and pushing ourselves. That's where the confidence lies, and that's where we grow, through resistance. I always say, through resistance, you can measure your power. You need resistance in order to measure your power.
You need resistance to measure your power.
If you do this, I mean, there's already a sense of resistance from the weight of your arm and the weight of the air. But to measure your power, what you're really capable of, and you feel you can do this easily, then you need to put more resistance on it, which is more weight, you know?
From a physical perspective, I can understand that, but can you name an example of how that would work mentally?
Mentally?
Yeah.
Go sit, if I would put you here with your eyes closed for 2 hours, I think for many it will be a struggle.
For sure it would.
Yeah. And not sleeping, but really just being present with what's present in the body. So that's the other part of it, you know? And that's the resistance also that you're encountering. But you can only know, once again, what you're capable of or not by meeting the resistance. Only then you can understand what is your power, which is understanding what you're capable of doing. So if I would sit here now and I would close my eyes, I would meet resistance. But I could only really know if I could sit 1 hour if I sit with the resistance. And then I understand like, okay, I can sit an hour.
And maybe one concrete example how we facilitate this is in the initiator program to call up people on the spot to do one activity for the other man. Trust me, the amount of stress that brings out, the amount of resistance that brings out from your body is, let's say, a third session, and then Oscar asks someone, okay, like stand up and do a session, whatever you feel like, for the whole group. Just facilitate it. And what it does, when you did it, you realize all of a sudden, that whole limiting belief is I'm not capable of this is gone. Because you had no preparation time. You were just like stood up like, whatever, like you were not ready, like what is ready for you. And you just did a session that was valuable. And that really gives you so much confidence and power, and coming through that initial resistance of your body, you start to learn when you feel that resistance is actually when something important that you should do should happen. And that goes a long way with exposure therapy and every other kind of methods to get out of your comfort zone.
Well, the stress that you're feeling when you gave the example of having to do a session for the group, I guess that kind of comes from a fear of public speaking, maybe some other stuff. Is when you're talking to people, is it that you have to identify their problems? And if so, how do you do that? Or do they just tell you themselves quite naturally? Does it just come out of them?
I'm not sure if I fully understand.
So when there's somebody that joins the group, at a point you want to give him these activities to do that will give him something to overcome, you know? How do you identify what their specific need is that they have to overcome?
That's a good question, man. Because I have a good answer, you know? Because I've been through it. That's it. For me, that's the answer. Because I believe the more I learn to get to know myself, the more I got to know myself, the more I start to see patterns. I see myself outside of me, in other persons. So because I did and am still doing all the introspection, I can now already identify many times what's actually present within that person. Because I see that because I've been there, because I've experienced that. So many times when we do, let's say, a certain exercise, and I see and I pick up on signals physically, mentally, in way of putting things in words, those are for me things like, okay, this is also how I interpreted this part from what I experienced. So then I can ask more directly or work towards it. And yeah, to be honest, I think I'm never really off actually on that.
But we all have different struggles. We all have different fears we have to overcome. So how is it that you can still see yourself or the patterns of yourself into somebody that might have fears or struggles that are completely different to yours?
Yes. Because the base emotion is the same. Because we can have different problems, we can have different struggles, we can have different forms of happiness. For you, it's maybe a coffee. For me, it's my matcha, you name it. But the sense of joy, we all know. So it doesn't always matter what the tangible problem is, or the struggle, or the thing, but it's actually the underlying current of emotions that are actually the ones that we can all identify with.
All right, that makes sense. That makes sense. So to round off our conversation, I'd just like to ask you what the biggest misconceptions about what you do are.
Yes. Yeah, I think the first one, as I mentioned before, I think the biggest is that if we call it man's work, which I don't know about the term, but if we talk about this type of stuff, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It actually means you're seeking greatness. You're seeking something bigger. You're seeking something greater that you can contribute to. Yeah, that would be actually my biggest one.
I think that's a great way to round it off. Is there anything you guys would still like to share or still like people to know about what you're doing?
Yeah, if I may add up, obviously there's this physical space now in Amsterdam North where we can come together. And maybe adding up to what Misi said before, what happens next after you finish a facilitates initiation, you name it, is actually we have now a subscription-based plan that actually gives you access to this physical space and the community, which means there's a table there now. So the intention is that, for instance, twice a month we're having a community dinner. You can just come in, you bring some food, we share the table, we come together. There will be meditation nights, there will be movie nights. There will be masterminds, there will be discussion groups, any ways of simply just staying engaged and accessing the brotherhood without necessarily still entering the formal programs, as in the facilitates initiation, a deep dive of 6 months, an inner alchemy in Portugal, which means the first step into coming is my suggestion is simply just coming here, joining the space, see what it can do to already just simply be surrounded by men without necessarily going in deep, you know. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect.
Yeah, maybe
Quite later, but you go. Yeah.
maybe just on that, I really want if the audience, the listeners, have the resistance about coming here for all the fears and all the weird shit that we do, just come. That's your cue.
Yeah, and I think this is the last one, actually, misconceptions. There was the last one to round off, which I think there's a misconception that this type of work, this brotherhood, the gathering of men, other big initiatives who are busy with the men's work, it tends to have this load, like it's you really have to go through your traumas and it's very nitty gritty and la la la. Well, actually, we're doing the opposite. There's a lot of healing taking place in joy and having fun and simply just coming together without any agendas, which is why we sometimes do barbecues, why we play dodgeball, why we sit in the park, that kind of stuff. Like, it's definitely not the nitty gritty. So if you have this conception about men's work being, something needs to be wrong with you and it has to be very heavy to go through stuff, then I say, like, it's bullshit. People decide to choose that part, but we believe in joy heals as much as going in does.
Guys, thanks so much. This was awesome. And good luck with all the great work you're doing.
Good luck, good shit. Thank you for having us, man.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.